Hi, friends. Welcome back to the Life with Loverly podcast. I have such a special episode for you today. I'm sitting down with a longtime friend of mine, Laura Hope Whitaker. Laura is the CEO of an organization you've seen me post about on my Instagram a lot over the years, ESP. ESP stands for Extra Special People and is a nonprofit membership organization dedicated to serving as a beacon of support for disabled individuals and their families. When I was in London for a Tom Holland event earlier this year, it was with Laura and ESP. Laura has an amazing story of stepping into the director position at only 19 and quickly learned that sometimes you choose your job, but in her case, her job chose her. She shares about not sidelining yourself out of an opportunity just because you feel like you're not ready and finding the beauty in the fact that there is power in our weakness. Here's a little bit about ESP before we dive in. ESP serves the Georgia community in three main ways: through 360 support like after-school care or bringing families to the beach who've never been before, an amazing summer camp they call Camp Hooray, which is kind of the Super Bowl of what they do, and a mobile coffee cart called Java Joy, which employs adults with disabilities. But I'll let Laura tell you the rest and all that she has planned for this organization. This truly is a transformational conversation. Laura is so special, and I hope her heart for this mission inspires something in you to take action today. Here's my conversation with Laura Hope Whitaker. Hi, friends. Welcome back to the Life with Loverly podcast. I am so excited about today's episode. I have a dear friend of mine, Laura Whitaker, here from ESP. Hi, Laura. How are you?
Hey, thanks for having me.
This is going to be such a great episode.
I'm excited to spend time with you.
Me too. I feel like I get to see you at events or like quickly at church. So I'm excited to have a little bit more of a sit down conversation and just kind of talk about all the things ESP. And I also want to tell our listeners a little bit more about who you are.
Yeah.
I think I really realized kind of your heart and who you are when you spoke at the gathering at Athens Church a few years ago. And that conversation and that just message still sticks with me to this day. You talked a lot about the Sabbath and like a day of rest. And truly after that is when I started to be like, you know what? I need to rest within my business, within Instagram. And I feel like you just opened up your heart then. So I am excited for our listeners to get some of your knowledge and just wealth that you have to share with us today.
Well, I'm excited to be here, and as two CEOs, it is really rare. We're moms. We're wives, right? We're believers and we're running businesses, and to take a day to stop. That was kind of a different topic, and you see it in the church world, but not really in the business world. And it's definitely saved me and helped me over the last several years as I go into my 20th year at ESP. So I'm excited to talk more about it.
I can't believe that you've been with ESP for 20 years. That's amazing.
Because I look so young, right?
Obviously.
I do have a unique story, so I'm excited to unpack that.
I know. Well, before we get into that, most recently we were just together last Monday for the ESP Ball for All, which is a golf tournament, and it was so much fun. This year, you guys raised even more money. Like this was the highest.
$200,000. Yes.
It was so amazing. I think it's such a great time for people to learn more about ESP and all the participants that are there. You get to like see what your money is going towards.
Yes.
Was this the biggest year of like turnout?
Definitely. And I love like the cheering. You get to like feel and experience what ESP is, because it's very different than what people expect when they think about people with disabilities. But it was the best turnout that we've had. We sold out months in advance, which was really great.
You guys sold out, and we had to like pull some strings.
You did have to pull some strings.
Chris was like, "Oh yeah, I need to sign up," and he went and was like, "It's sold out." So he's like texted Alex. He was like, help. What do we do? He's like, I'm going to open one more spot. So we're the reason that there was an odd number.
And thankfully, Chris's best friend's on our board. So that kind of worked out.
I know. I was like, okay, thankfully. But it was such so much fun.
And you guys looked so cute.
This year we did go with the theme.
Yes.
Teresa and I were matching in our Birdie and Co. or our Birdie golf outfits, and then we had the guys matching too, which they were kind of like
cute.
Yes. So
I'm sure they rolled their eyes, but I think they felt pretty good walking in there. And you said we should have a best dress category next year. And I'm like, that's actually a brilliant idea.
Right?
I think we're going to step it up and have that category next year.
Well, I think there was like us. Most of the teams are all male teams.
Correct.
And like all of the celebrities that are playing are like past football players, obviously all male.
Yeah.
So there's only like a handful of female teams, and we
could change that.
Yeah.
If we have a best dress category, I think we could recruit some more.
I do too. So we'll see. But that was such a fun event. And then you guys have camp going on right now, which I know we'll get into more about like what camp is and what's happening there. But that last year we came and volunteered, and it's just, you can't not feel joy when you are there, when you are around these amazing humans who have just as much ability as able-bodied people.
Yes.
It's just, I don't know, it just really opens your heart in this whole other like side of compassion that I really wish everybody could experience.
I do too. And, that's kind of the goal, is to take the model that we have here in Athens, and the Boys and Girls Club and Habitat for Humanity and all of them got started somewhere, right? And we have this 40-year-old model that is working. And to your point, it's changing perspectives and changing the whole community for the better. It's not just about people with disabilities and their families. That's why we exist, right? But it's for your daughters to experience on the playground that we have. It's for people that are volunteering, high school, college students that are changing their perspectives and going in and being better doctors and better business leaders. Because they have these moments of engagement and connection and ultimately compassion. You talked about like it opens up a whole new world of compassion that you never even understood that you had. And that's what's fascinating. The difference between empathy and compassion is empathy is you're feeling something. Compassion is you're feeling something towards somebody and you do something about it.
Yeah.
That's the biggest difference. And at ESP, we're doing a lot of things about it.
Yeah.
So,
okay. So I've shared with my listeners a little bit about ESP already. So they have some context and background, but I would love to hear from you what a typical family looks like that comes through the ESP program.
Yeah. So, what's beautiful about ESP is nothing's really typical, but what we do know is that 1 in 5 kids are on the autism spectrum somewhere. So that population is growing. We serve individuals with Down syndrome, cerebral palsy, rare chromosomal disabilities, even kids that are higher on the spectrum or have just a rare intellectual developmental disability. We serve all types of kids, and we start serving the family when they are born and when they're ready to come to us. So we have a music therapy program for 0 to 4-year-olds. And what's beautiful about that is, oftentimes when you have kids, and I know you've had kids around the same times as your friends, and I have 2, and I have 3 typical children. So when I had my kids alongside my friends, you go through these milestones together, right? They start crawling at the same time and walking at the same time and eating the same foods, and you're comparing to other moms. And what's the most isolating to the families that we serve is their kids are not going through those milestones at the same time, right? And so we found later on, this really only started about 7 or 8 years ago, that if we can get those families together, the families of children and babies with disabilities, we have a music therapy program every Friday. It's the sweetest day of the week. These little babies come in, and a lot of them have these little soft plastic glasses, and they're just so unbelievably adorable. And these parents come in and they meet each other. Yeah. And we have families that now go on vacation together, and they are each other's community, which is so beautiful. And so that they start then. And then at age 4, our participants can start programming after school programs, summer camp, as you mentioned, which is happening right now. And then eventually when they grow up and they graduate from high school, they can become a Joyrista with our program, Java Joy. So it's really a spectrum of life that we're serving. And we're serving the family, we're serving the siblings and the participant as well.
Yeah, I love that. And it's not just children. You've got all ages. I mean, I think like your oldest participant, isn't she in her 60s?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And what's beautiful is like mentally, she still is probably, I don't know, 16 years old, right? So she still loves camp.
Right.
And she still loves the joy of childhood.
Yeah.
But yeah, physically, she's 60 years old.
Exactly.
But still wants to be at camp and still wants to be at ESP.
Which I love. Okay, so how did you initially get started with ESP?
Yeah, so I grew up in Atlanta. I'm one of 4 kids. I'm the second girl. And volunteering was a way of life for my family. My mom was a nurse. My dad worked at IBM. And we just kind of always volunteered. We always had something to do as a family. And my parents always encouraged that. So I grew up, in kind of a more affluent part of Atlanta in Cobb County. My parents kind of diversified our dinner table with just different people that looked different than me. They served on boards of directors. And so I grew up just with that seed. And so when I came to the University of Georgia, I knew I wanted to volunteer. And it was actually my ex-boyfriend's sister that introduced me to ESP. Some people come into your life for different reasons, right? And he told me about it, and I was like, hey, I've had some experience with people with disabilities. Let me give it a try. So as my little 18-year-old self, I walked in. I'll never forget. I was wearing Umbros. I don't know if you ever wore Umbros.
Right. Like the soccer shorts.
The soccer shorts. They were the thing then. And walked in as my little 18-year-old self. And we were serving about 40 participants at the time. Small 1,200 square foot building. And it was a Saturday. And it was a Saturday in the fall. I was a freshman at the University of Georgia. And it was chaos. I mean, just controlled chaos. It was like lock the doors. And I looked at Martha, the founder of our program, and I was like, what can I do to help? She's like, you can run music. And I was like, you don't want me to run music. And she's like, just go try. Just make a fool out of yourself and have fun. And that was my first leadership opportunity. And I fell in love. I mean, that first day, there was, as a second girl, and some people can probably relate to this. I had no idea who I was. I was constantly compared to my older sister, and my older sister was perfect and graceful. Her name is Emily Grace. I mean, she made straight A's. I had to work for my A's. Yep. She was very in the box and just close to perfect, and I adored her. But I had no idea who I was. And when I was there at ESP, despite the chaos, I was so captivated by how I felt while I was there. I wasn't thinking about myself or comparing myself to my sister or to my dorm mates that had the perfect dorm rooms and all of those things. I was just in love with being there and around people that weren't comparing themselves either. People with autism and Down syndrome, and were loving life, and I was addicted to it. So that's how I got started. And then a year later, our founder was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. I'll never forget. So I was working at summer camp, fell in love with summer camp, and she sat us down at the very end, 30 college students, and she said, I've been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. ESP, you and me, which is kind of one of our phrases. And she's like, figure it out. And so there were 4 of us college girls that were like, okay, we've got to figure out how to run a nonprofit. And over the course of that next year, the founder's husband and daughter interviewed me and hired me as the executive director, although I was 19 and I refused to be called an executive director. I'm like, no one is going to believe me. And so I did, I became the camp director, and I learned all of the lessons based on all the wrong things, but that's how I started at ESP, and knew I wanted to continue the mission, and knew I had no idea what to do, but just knew I had to do the next right thing. And I sometimes say that sometimes you choose your job and other times it chooses you, and really felt like at that point in my life, despite all the wrong reasons, needing to get through my sophomore year of college being one of them, geology class mainly, and then having to raise $50,000 and figure out how to run a summer camp for kids with disabilities and hire all of my friends. was really my first lesson in you're often not ready for what God has in store, but leaning into that gave me an opportunity. And 20 years later, I'm so thankful I said yes in that moment.
So did you finish out college and do like you were running ESP and in school and had, 2-3 years to go? I mean, that's a lot on your plate.
Somehow. I mean, yes. So I finished college and I actually went in and got my master's degree as well. ESP couldn't really afford to pay me at that time. And so I was kind of doing paycheck to paycheck.
Yep.
I met my husband actually the year that I took over ESP. So while I was still 19, I'm the type of person I'm going to run myself ragged. I mean, you can kind of hear it in my voice. I just go and go and go. And I prayed for someone that would take care of me because I wasn't great taking care of myself. And we were set up on a blind date, and he's from Florida. He's a Florida Gator as well. I mean, we're totally opposite. He's 7 years older than me. I went on a blind date as a 19-year-old with a 26-year-old. And I knew in that very moment, like, he was it. He was, so that was a big part of my story in terms of him supporting me in those early years. We dated long distance. He was in Atlanta and I was in Athens. But I finished undergrad, went to grad school, had a baby while I was in grad school, unexpectedly after we had gotten married. And so, yeah, it was a gritty 5, 6, 7 years. But it expanded my capacity.
Yeah.
I always think like, now I'm so thankful. Life was so full. Grad school, full-time job. I had to work another job as well. Married, had my first baby, through all of that. And it really just kind of like, I picture it like a rubber band. It expanded my capacity that got me ready for the growth of the organization long term, to help me have the energy and the capacity to lead an organization and lead a team and lead multiple cities down the road. So,
and it's amazing what God can put on your heart and on your plate. And you think like, hey, I'm tapped out. Like, this is too much. Yes. And then there's just ways that he's like, no, you're not. You can do this. And he shows up.
Yes.
So I'm sure looking back on just your journey in life and with ESP, everything that you had to go through those first few years were probably just the stepping stones to get you and get ESP to where it is today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And like, I kind of picture it like if you can walk into, it's like a giant puzzle, and God has put these pieces around for you to find. And if you can find them and they are honoring to him and part of his plan for you, he's always going to help you find the next piece. Right. And it's our act of worship, right? To honor him. And I can either worry or I can worship with the way that I live. And I think that he's always, in moments where it was the 9th hour and I'm like, I don't know how we're going to make it. I don't know how we're going to build this building. I don't know how we're going to serve one more family. We had a tremendous waiting list and launched a capital campaign in the midst of a recession. And people were like, you can't raise $3 million in 3 years. And I kept going back to, it's about the kid on the waiting list. And if we raise 200,000, we'll serve more kids on the wait list.
Right.
If we raise... And all the while, I mean, there's so many miniature stories about how these puzzle pieces came together, but God did it. And we raised $4 million in 3 years and built a building and eliminated the waiting list. And, that was one part that's the Athens story. And now that's happening in Rome and in Atlanta and Savannah. And I really do think he gives you the capacity if we choose to look for it.
Yeah.
If we choose to pay attention, he's going to provide the resources that we need.
I've recently talked to 2 other people who have separately mentioned action breeds clarity.
Yes.
And it's so in just hearing like some of this backstory, and it's like you don't know what you're doing, but you just have to step into action, and then like clarity will come from that, or a new plan might come from that. But it's the act of doing and listening and being obedient, and then clarity comes.
Yes.
And I just think of how you've had to just accept that role so many times over the years with ESP.
Over and over. And I think these days, terms like imposter syndrome or things are too hard, or I'm just going to tap out or ghost out of this. I'm like, I always think like it's the grit, it's the pearl on the other side of the grit. Mm-hmm. That's the good stuff. Mm-hmm. And it's in identity, in the becoming, not identity first.
Right.
And so, I didn't know what the next best thing was, but God always provided a way in the movement and in the action, and the clarity and wisdom came later when I looked back on it. But I'm so thankful I didn't know those terms then, because as a 19-year-old, of course I didn't know how to be a CEO or an executive director, but that's like how God has always worked. Mm-hmm. Like if you look at the story in the Bible, like God has always worked through the weak and the meek and the inexperienced. And that's what I see every day at ESP. I feel like the participants at ESP teach me over and over again that it's counter to what culture tells us. Yeah. It's humility and it's grace and it's compassion. It's always, it's individuals who from culture standards look weak that teach me the greatest lessons. Right. And I feel like those times, I didn't know what I was doing at 19, but 20 years later, I think it's the best thing I now know is that I didn't know anything.
Yeah.
And I had to surround myself with really wise people that could teach me and train me. I couldn't fake being a 19-year-old executive director. Right. Like everyone knew this little blonde chick from Atlanta did not know how to run a nonprofit organization. So I had to surround myself with people who could teach me and train me. And still to this day, 20 years later, I feel like I don't know what I'm doing. Yes, we've done a lot of really amazing things, but I still need to surround myself with mentors and people in my life to help guide me to that action, to help me lean in instead of pull back.
Totally.
And that's been a big part of my story for sure.
Yeah. How many people were on staff with you at the time? And how did you have the confidence to run that program? I mean, I know we just kind of sort of went a little bit through this and how God was just really showing up with you. But I mean, how many other people were you in charge of?
Well, from a pay perspective, it was just me.
Yeah.
But I had to hire 30 camp counselors and then manage a board. Our board of directors, there's 4 people on our board of directors, and one of them was in jail for embezzlement of another organization. Another one's son passed away kind of tragically after I took over at age 19. The third taught me what QuickBooks was and a P&L spreadsheet. And I mean, as a 19-year-old, I had no idea what I was looking at. And I had to go present for grants and things like that in front of people. And I had to know what I was talking about from a financial perspective. And so that's kind of how I started. And now that we have close to 40 full-time employees, over 200 part-time staff, 68 joyeristas that we employ, 3 soon to be 4 cities. I look back on that and I'm like, thank goodness that I had all these years to prepare, because leadership is hard. Yeah. And I think, there was a lot of people I had to lead, a lot of movement I had to lead, but how did I do it at that age? I mean, honestly, I think a little bit was I was blind to the challenges. I didn't know what I didn't know, which was actually a blessing in disguise. I look back on some of the things I did when I was 19, 20, 21 years old, and I was like, now I think about, man, would I still make those decisions? Mm-hmm. And I'm so thankful I did, because I didn't know what the risk would be on the other side of it.
It's so true. Yes. Like it's almost just like, well, I don't know. Let's just go for it, because I don't know what we have to lose.
Right. Yeah. And there's a faith component to that too, that now that I do know what's on the other side, I'm like, okay, for example, going to a new city.
Yeah.
Or, some of our big plans that we have for an overnight camp. It's like, it doesn't really make sense from like a mental perspective, but from a faith perspective, it makes total sense. Right. There are people that need it. And so I often think about that little 19-year-old girl, and I'm like, man, she had more than I thought that she did, or more than she realized she did. And a little bit of that faith, I think, is something I still try to emulate today.
Yeah. What advice would you give someone if they're in a similar position of having a big opportunity in front of them, but they feel scared or not equipped to step into it?
That's a great question. I think oftentimes people can see through and they know that you also don't know what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like my secret sauce all along the way has been humility and just being willing to say, I don't know what to do here. Can you teach me? Can you train me? And in doing so, I've surrounded myself with some really amazing people who could teach me, whether it was marketing or whether it was financial or whether it was legal, just surrounding myself with people who could hold me up. And then I think your faith, we can all like pep ourselves up in the morning and look at ourselves in the mirror and say, you can do this. But really my faith, and it has nothing to do with, a church or really any of that. It's just more my individual faith and my own relationship with God has given me the strength that I know I can't do it, but He can.
Yeah.
And if I'm stepping into something that He's called me to do, whether it's motherhood or being a wife or I don't know, something silly like volunteering at school or whatever it is, if I'm stepping into something He's given me and He's going to equip me, even if it's in the 9th hour, He's going to equip me with what I need to serve Him. So that's what I would say.
That's great advice.
Yeah.
And it's so true. I mean, I think a lot of people, especially now, are stepping into these like entrepreneurial roles with like the internet. I mean, take my industry for an example. And as you grow and as you need help, and for me, I've hired a team over the years, but like I didn't start this business thinking I was going to be a leader or a CEO. Or I say to Nichelle sometimes, I'm like, I don't know how to do this. Like, I don't know how to be a CEO. It's hard to do the creative side and the like running a business side at the same time. And am I doing this right? And I think there's so many people who can just need to remember, like, you are put in this role for a reason. God is going to show up and lead you. And, He's not letting you go through this alone. And a lot of what you just said, but I know a lot of people will kind of resonate with that. And it's something, it seems like so easy to forget, or you want this like hard, like, all of a sudden, like a manual has just like dropped down and you're like,
the manual never comes.
Right.
It just never has. I've been looking for it for 20 years.
Right.
And the manual never comes. Yes.
Yeah. So, but we are so equipped.
Yes.
If you have faith and if you can trust that He has you where He wants you and where He's leading you.
Yes.
But for some reason, that part seems like it's really the devil being like, you're not enough. You aren't a good leader. You aren't going to be a good CEO, and pulling you down. And I've really realized over the years, like, that is something I feel like the devil tries to get me in those areas.
Yes. Particularly when you're trying to do something really great.
Yeah.
And really honoring, and I think the enemy works double time on those of us that are really trying to work hard to grow something and build something and honor Him. And so, surrounding yourself with people who can speak truth to you has been a big part. Like Sabbath that we talked about, like taking a day where you turn it off and just listen to Him and spend time with family has been a big part of, as the organization has grown, the voices grow, and the pressure grows. And all of a sudden I have to provide for people's families and all of that. And so the responsibility and the intensity grows, which requires of me as a leader to pause even more and to quiet myself even more so that I can listen to God, because that's a hard thing to do in today's world. With social media, there's so many voices. With leading people, there's so many voices. Culture's telling us certain things. So like listening to certain music on the way to work, journaling, Sabbathing once a week, surrounding myself with people who can lift me up and speak truth into me, finding a church that you feel like you can worship and express yourself. All of those things I feel like have helped like just guide me and help me find those puzzle pieces, because sometimes I walk by them and I don't even see them. Right. Because other voices are louder, like the enemy's voice, which is really loud for me too.
Yeah. Okay, so let's move into talking about ESP today.
Yeah.
I know we've got 3 locations with a 4th. Is Savannah, like, where are we with Savannah? Is it established or establishing?
And we are planting seeds there.
Okay.
So there's a team of people, volunteers, who are on our champion board there, and they are trying to raise money down there.
Okay.
So that's really the next step. Then we'll hire an executive director and begin to start a team to run our programs down there.
Okay, that's so exciting. Do we think like next year or later this year, hopefully?
Yeah, I think by next year,
Okay.
hopefully by the end of the year, we'll have an executive director.
Okay.
And then by next year, we'll have programs and families down there. We already have so many families who are just eager
Like
to
ready
have
to
a
go.
community. Yes. And that have heard about ESP over the years. Maybe it's through the University of Georgia and the football team or whatnot. And they have children that want to be a part of a community like ESP. And so it's going to be really great to see it launch.
Come to life.
Yes. And it's been a great experiment,
Yeah.
back to the manual that doesn't
Yeah.
exist. Like for us, franchising looks different than a for-profit, but also
Right.
very similar. So going into new groups, it really starts with people that say, most of them are families of kids with disabilities that are like, we want this for our community. And they come to ESP and they taste it and they think they know what they're getting.
Yeah.
And some of them might stay in Athens for a week and their child might come to camp. And then after that, they're like, we need this in our community.
Yeah.
And so there's a list of a dozen other cities that have reached out and said, we want an ESP. And
That's
so
amazing.
we've learned over the last couple of years, like what to do and what not to do, particularly as a leader. I think everybody thinks like me sometimes, or everybody has the same work ethic or whatever. And that's just not the case. So we've learned things about leadership and who to hire, but also which communities are good for ESP and which ones might be more challenging.
Right.
Our Metro Atlanta area has been more challenging because it's not a community. Like in Athens, people have wrapped their arms around it. In Rome, Georgia, they've wrapped their arms around it. In Atlanta, it's been a little more difficult because there's not the same sense of community. So we've had to figure that out. So I think Savannah will be a really great fourth. I think they're going to rally and wrap their arms around an ESP. And then we've got some out-of-state cities that are in the pipeline next.
So exciting. So much potential, really. I mean, this is kind of just the start, and I know 20 years in for you. How long has ESP been around before you came on board?
So Martha was there for about 20 years. So we're looking at about 40 years at this point. 1986 is when it was founded. So next year will be 40 years.
Wow.
And, it was just a local community thing for many, many years. And what happened was, a lot of people have asked, like, why are we growing? Why not just stay local? What started happening, I mentioned the wait list, and we built this new, beautiful, universally accessible building and Miracle League field and playground. And we started having families move from all over to come to Athens. And, what's interesting and kind of fun is that they would tell us when they would come and stay here, it wasn't just ESP. It's the ripple of ESP. Like when they would go to the grocery store, people would treat their child differently. Or when they were in a restaurant, people would treat their child with autism differently. And so it was an entire community that really embraced their child.
Right.
And so that's the magic of ESP is it's not just a program and a service for people with disabilities. It's like actually changing perspectives of the entire community. And so that wait list grew. People kept moving here. We now serve 900 families in the Northeast Georgia area. We can't keep serving that many families right here, and we're going to try. But we were like, man, COVID really helped us because we had to be in 6 different locations during the summer of 2020 in order to run camp. And I looked at one of my employees at the time, and one of my team members, she's awesome, and she just kind of takes all my crazy ideas. You don't know what that's like, do you? Just people who look at you sometimes are like, okay, Laura. And I looked at her and I'm like, we just figured out how to do camp in 6 different locations. I think we could do this in multiple cities. And we had all these other families who wanted to start an ESP. So I'm like, let's just try it. So we tried it with Java Joy, and now those 2 programs, Rome is, they've launched a large capital campaigning. We just bought a building. We're going to build a playground similar to the one here. They're serving 150 families in the Northwest corridor and continuing to grow. So it's been really fun and messy, very, very messy. I've learned, again, a lot about what not to do.
Yeah.
As we've gone through this process.
So tell me about summer camp. Well, I know a lot about summer camp, but let's talk to our listeners about summer camp and just what that experience is like for the participants and for their families. Because I think one thing people don't realize is like living with a child with disabilities is a full-time job. There is not a lot of breaks, but you guys give the opportunity to these families to like have a little bit of a break. So let's talk summer camp.
Yes. Gosh, did you grow up going to camp?
I did.
Okay. I just know people that grew up going to camp. And really it's the only time that you're removed from your environment. Maybe you have one or two friends that you know, and you're put into a scenario where you have to try new things. Your parents aren't around. There's all these activities you've never experienced and all these people that you've never experienced. And really, it's kind of like going into the work world or going into college, right? So Martha our founder saw that people with disabilities didn't have the same opportunities during the summer. And so she started this idea of what we call Hooray Camps. And she started with a day camp. Now we have camp in 3 different locations. We have 8 weeks here in Athens. 2 of those weeks are overnight camp. And we take, my 3 kids go to camp and they get to do all types of things, sports and crafts and crazy games and all types of funny antics that go along with camps and songs and all of those things. My 2 youngest are going to overnight camp on Sunday, and you drop them off and they get to be a kid for an entire week around people and activities they don't typically get to engage with. And we do the same thing, whether a child has a trach or a G-tube or multiple medications or is in a wheelchair and fully has to be supported, their diaper changed, all of that. It feels to that family like, how in the world would I let my child go to camp? And we take what most families have never even thought to imagine leaving their child for a week. We had one parent. So one of our overnight camps was last week, and 9-year-old little girl, she is in a wheelchair, has a rare chromosomal disability. They have 2 other kids. They're bringing her, they're dropping her off, and these new families come in with talk about a manual. They are coming in with pages of, when she says this, it means this. She likes this kind of food, not this kind of food. When she takes her medication, it has to be, crushed and then put in applesauce and then given in this sort of way. And so it is a full-time job.
Yeah.
I mean, these parents come in and think oh my gosh, this 18 or 19-year-old child is going to take care of my little human. But as we were kind of getting their family ready and going through this process, I've seen it happen hundreds of times. You see this fear in parents' minds, but also in a weird spark of excitement. And the dad looked at me and I said, okay, so we're going to take care of your daughter. Your only job this week is to take your wife on a date. And immediately, every time I say it, you see the mom's just eyes water because they're like, I didn't know that was even possible.
Yeah.
And the husband says, actually, we're going to Hilton Head for 3 days. This is the first time we've been away since my daughter was born and since our honeymoon. And I was like, that's why we do it.
Yeah.
Right there. That's why we do it. And she had an amazing week. She bonded with her buddy who, these buddies are 18, 19, 20-year-old college kids that come from all over and devote their summer to ESP. And the bond and the exchange that happens between, what I felt when I was 18 or 19 and what these college kids feel, with the ongoing reminder of this is what their parents do every day.
Yeah.
They don't sleep. They're, caretaking all the time, changing diapers and G-tubes. They're providing emergency care for seizures, constantly moving from one place to the other. that's what they do every day. And they're having the opportunity to spend a week away of respite and support for just them while we love, not just take care of, but we are loving and caring for their child. Some of them don't even let their families take care of their kids, but they let our little 18, 19, and 20-year-olds at ESP take care of their kids. And that is what camp is all about, really.
Yeah. It is such a beautiful experience because I've seen it firsthand just as we've been there volunteering. And you can truly tell the bond between the counselor and the camper and every, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's a 1-to-1 ratio.
Yeah,
like every participant in camper has a buddy.
That's right.
And so it is like they are their person, and the connection that they have and just the sense of like responsibility and like, I'm going to take care of you. You can just tell that these counselors and these buddies are just, okay, I'm committed to this. Like you are my responsibility for this week, and I'm going to make sure you had the best time ever by the time you leave here.
Yes. And they're exhausted.
Yeah,
both
I can
of them.
imagine.
I went on Thursday night for the talent show, which is like one of my favorite nights. And I was just checking on all of our staff, and we had 100 staff there and 100 participant campers. And I just was going around asking everybody how they're doing, how they're feeling. And they're all just like, I'm exhausted, but I'm doing great. And I'm going to cry when my buddy leaves tomorrow. And it's just that good exhaustion that I feel like, you know, in today's world, one of the things that these college students are getting at ESP is just a sense of servitude. They're finding themselves in serving others. I mean, I'll never forget being up with my first child as he didn't sleep for, the first 6 months of his life, thinking back upon overnight camp. And I had a buddy with autism, and I didn't sleep the entire week. And I'm like, if I could do that then, I can do this now.
Right.
Like it gave me like a sense of resilience and helped me find myself as an 18, 19-year-old and 20-year-old. So these college kids are going to be really great parents one day because they're learning to lean in and give and ultimately find themselves by serving other people. So it's really beautiful to watch.
And I think one thing that's so amazing about ESP in Athens is we have the University of Georgia right here.
Yes.
And there are so many students who volunteer, and we have like just this huge base of people to pull from. So I think that has been like such a huge reason of success of like volunteers. And there've been some really amazing kids with like great heads on their shoulders who genuinely are like wanting to come and serve. And it's like, I feel like I've heard of, well, my sorority sisters did this, so I'm doing this. It's like a legacy thing of like generations of people and friends who come to serve at ESP.
And sometimes they find their spouse there, which is so beautiful. We've had so many weddings because you find like-minded people at ESP. And you're right. I mean, we have over 1,500 college students that volunteer with us throughout the year here in Athens from UGA. And it is a big part of their college experience. It's a part of their community. Like I said, they get to find themselves in the service of others. They get to lead. They get to feel what compassion feels like. They get, social media experience or whatever type of experience they want in college. They have the opportunity to do that through ESP.
Yeah. One of our babysitters is actually an ESP volunteer, which I didn't know until I was like swiping through a post on ESP. And I was like, oh my goodness, like she's there like doing, flag time. And I was, as soon as she came the next time, I was like, you volunteer at ESP? Oh my goodness. It almost just made me feel this like deeper connection to her, that she was passionate about volunteering, and especially with an organization that we love so much. So it was really
makes
cool.
You feel good about taking care of your girls too, right? I mean, those volunteers get really great experience with an array of medical challenges and all types of disabilities. So anytime I would steal one to watch my kids, I knew they could do the job. No matter what my kids put in front of them, they could take care of it if they've been at ESP.
It's so funny. Okay, so fast forward to this year. ESP is kind of becoming an international brand. Let's talk a little bit about the Tom Holland event in London. How did Tom Holland become part of ESP? And let's just kind of talk about this event. I was there, so I'm excited to dive into this. But tell our listeners about how Tom and his family got involved with ESP.
Yeah, so it's kind of a wild story. And back to what we were talking about in terms of like just the resources kind of coming, stepping into something and the resources coming. But Tom was filming Spider-Man in Covington, and his family had recently launched a foundation that was largely supporting organizations in the UK. And because he was filming here and staying here, they really wanted to find an organization they cared a lot about in the US. And so I think it was their real estate agent that told them about ESP through Keller Williams. And she was like, you've just got to check out this organization. And she was sweet. She was like, there's just nothing like it. And she told them specifically about Java Joy. Mm-hmm. And so Tom and his mom called and kind of did an interview of sorts with us. And to be honest, I didn't know who Tom was at the time.
Which was probably like a great thing,
I mean, yeah, I don't know. Sometimes I feel like I have my head in the sand because I'm just so busy like doing the things that I do. And I came home and my kids were like, Mom, Tom Holland is Spider-Man. And I was like, oh, okay. And I hadn't seen any of the Spider-Man movies. I'm like, okay, cool. And they're like, no, you have to watch Spider-Man. You don't understand how amazing he is. I was like, okay. So later I caught on, obviously. But they supported one joyrista. So it costs us about $5,000 per year to employ a joyrista, all the support that comes alongside of that. And so they supported one, and then the next year they supported two, and then they got to know our joyristas just kind of virtually. And so then they supported three, and then last year they supported four. And while I was on the phone with Tom's mom, last fall, she was just like, I didn't realize that ESP was so much more than Java Joy. Like, I didn't realize that you're doing camps and after school programs and music therapy and family support. And so I toured her around the Athens site, and she just was blown away. And she's like, I just wish you guys could come to our gala, because I just think you would provide such a different level of engagement and help donors to understand what the money is going to. And so I kind of tucked that away and it was like, yeah, that would be really fun. I've never been to London, so I think it'd be really fun to be able to go, but how in the world would we get there? And so she said, well, if you can find a donor to pay for your expenses, we'll cover the cost of the table. And so I kind of floated it out there to a couple of our board members. It was like, hey, we had been on some business trips. I mean, if you think about it, and you work full time and you get to travel for work, people with disabilities have never had the opportunity to go on a business trip. Like for us, we're like, oh, gotta travel. Yeah. Right. But if you have a disability, you've never been given the opportunity that's like, hey, you're needed in somewhere else.
Yeah.
Like you have skills and abilities that are needed somewhere else. So they brought it back up to me and just kind of said, hey, it'd be really great. We'd love at the gala for the joyristas to be there any chance. So found a very generous board member who covered the cost of the trip. And we had this table. And of course, we had to fill it out. And I'm like, who do I want to go to London with us? Of course, Brittany and Chris would be so fun to go to London with. So we built out our table and headed to London. And it was an unbelievable experience.
It really was. I mean, just the joy the whole time. I mean, that will forever be like a trip that I will remember and will think about. And even Chris had the most fun going to the Tower of London and, trying fish and chips with Nikki, and just we still talk about some of the things that he said, and it's
Yes. And I think Liz tried sushi with you for the first time.
Teaching her how to use chopsticks.
The chopsticks.
And we were all so excited and proud of her when...
And she learned how to blow dry her hair for the first time. We were sharing a hotel room, and she's like, can you help me blow dry my hair? And I said, sure, I'd love to, but I'm going to teach you how to do it. And so she's so proud of herself because she now knows how to independently blow dry her hair. She's a world traveler. She's got a passport, all of those things. And I think something I didn't expect out of the trip, and you experienced this, I'm curious to know if you felt this too. When I described the gala, it was this beautiful Claridge's hotel, all these, people from London that were there and various nonprofits. Nikki and Liz truly were needed.
Yeah.
In that environment. It wasn't like a pity situation where like, oh, please, so that they can see where the money's going. It was like, no, we want them there because they will provide a level of energy.
Yes, the energy
and joy,
absolutely.
as you said, that just it was contagious. And I feel like it started with our table because we were having so much fun.
I know.
And then it just kind of rippled out and people kept coming over. And then, of course, Nikki gets on stage and sings My Heart Will Go On with Tom Holland on stage, which was totally impromptu.
I loved it.
But then they got a standing ovation. And then it was like they were the celebrities,
yeah.
not even really the Hollands after that, which I just think really embodies what ESP is all about. It's about, and what Java Joy is all about, us going into typical places, whether it be the Claridge's Hall or Mercedes-Benz Stadium or just a local bank or school. And what I call it the joy exchange, which is like Nikki and Liz have abilities that need to be activated.
Yeah.
And you have certain abilities that need to be activated. And it's in that human connection. It's in that exchange. It's in that hug. It's on stage as Tom has his arms wrapped around Nikki on stage. It's like in that moment of human connection, we really find the joy that I think we all look for in the wrong places. It's like in that human connection is where the joy exchange really happens.
Totally.
And I think that was experienced in London for sure. I'm glad you guys were there to experience it.
It was just so cool to see how many people were like, I want to go talk to them.
Yes.
Or I want to have a conversation with Nikki. Or Liz was just asking questions and
work in the room.
They were both working the room and just they have no filter.
Right.
And so it just kind of like maybe it was a breath of fresh air that, because sometimes events like that can be a little stuffy and it can be a little who's who-y. And so to have two people there who were just like, I have a question. I'm not afraid to ask it. And, it was so refreshing and they were just so welcomed. It felt like everybody was able to just like let their shoulders down a little bit and have really raw conversations, which I think was really needed.
And it's what we all want, right? I mean, at the end of the day, we all want authentic human connection. And we, for so many different reasons, don't do it.
Yeah.
And when you interact with someone with a disability, oftentimes it is just them.
Yeah.
They're not trying to be anybody else.
Right.
It's their authentic human self, and it brings out our authentic human self, which is really beautiful.
I was just talking to Nikki the other day at the golf tournament, and I was like, okay, like we've been to London. Like, oh, if you could go anywhere in the world, like where should we go next? And he's like, oh, I got to go to Myrtle Beach. And I'm like, of all the places? And he's like, listen, they have the outlet malls. They have this like crab shack that he loves. He was like, I got to get back to Myrtle Beach.
The man knows what he wants. Out of all the places in the world, Myrtle Beach is it.
I was like, I feel like we could probably figure out a way to make that happen.
Surely there's a business that wants to book Java Joy in Myrtle Beach.
I know. So it just like the purity.
Yes.
Which, speaking of Java Joy, I know we've kind of touched around it, but tell us about what exactly Java Joy is for those people who don't know Java Joy's mission, and just like how even people local or in Atlanta, like how you can have Java Joy come and serve your business or your community.
So Java Joy was kind of a happy accident. It was shortly after we built our new building. We had corporate partners that were coming in. We actually had the space to have them volunteer like you guys have done, wrap presents and serve dinner. And I kept having business owners tell me the same thing, which was, we love to come to ESP. It's the right thing to do. But my employees are leaving ESP and coming back to the office, and they're more joyful and they're more proud of where they work. And thus they're more productive. So we're selling more cars, or, the spreadsheet looks a little different from a bank perspective, or whatever it is. And so I kind of kept hearing that over and over again. I was like, well, not every business can come to us. What if we went to them? And then at the same time, what we know is 87% of adults with disabilities who want and can work are unemployed, which is crazy.
Yeah.
And so I was seeing our participants age out of school and go into these jobs and only keep them for 3 or 4 months because people didn't know Nikki and didn't know that he wanted to be the coffee fairy.
Yeah.
And they didn't know Liz and what her abilities truly were. And so so we started this little coffee cart with a janitor cart, and we started going out to our corporate partners and saying thank you. And it just caught on.
Mm-hmm.
And so now it is a full-fledged part of our business model. I mentioned we have over 60 what we call joyristas. So barista plus joy equals a joyrista. And we want to keep employing more individuals. And most of them, I thought that we would transition them out of Java Joy into other places of business, which has happened some. But I'll never forget, I was sitting in front of 11 of them a year after we started Java Joy. And I was like, okay, we're going to whiteboard where you want to go. Like, after Java Joy, what is your dream job? And they all looked at me. Nikki was there. Colin, who you know, was there.
Mm-hmm.
And they looked at me and they were like, Laura, this is our dream. This is it.
Yeah.
Java Joy. We love it. We get to go meet new people. We get to work. We get paid. And so it was then I knew we needed to grow Java Joy.
Mm-hmm.
So Java Joy is a mobile operation. We go into businesses, organizations, schools. Some businesses send it as like a gift to clients or a thank you to clients and sponsor it. So we go all over the place, all over Metro Atlanta, in Athens, all over Rome, soon to be Savannah. We've done some business trips where we take our joyristas to other places, to large conferences and things like that. And our motto is coffee, hug, and joy. And it's really what you and I experienced in London. It's a snippet of that. Mm-hmm. It's like, some of us, particularly those of us that are a little bit older, we've never hugged someone in a wheelchair before.
Yeah.
Or talked to someone with autism before, or held a conversation with someone with an intellectual disability. And so depending on your experience as a child, that typically kind of dictates how you feel about interacting with people who are different than you. And so Java Joy kind of takes what we all love, coffee, really good coffee, mm-hmm. and gives people a positive experience where they get to interact with someone with a disability, get really good coffee, get a hug, have a great experience, and leave feeling that joy exchange. And then maybe changing the wiring in their brain, those neural connections that we all need, a positive neural connection, the action that then brings wisdom after. We lean into that awkward moment and oftentimes find the aha of like, I don't really have to know what to say. I don't have to know what to do. It was just a natural human connection. And so that's what Java Joy is doing that I get excited about. Is it's not only employing people with disabilities, it's not only a part of our nonprofit business model, but it's also changing and rewiring and shifting perspectives of people interacting with people with disabilities.
And it's so great because you get coffee and you get a hug. And I find myself like, and just over the years as I've been more involved with ESP, you're just having a conversation with a real person. Just because maybe they look different or they're in a wheelchair or they have different tics or whatever their disability or ability might be, they're still a person. They still have a name. They still are having a day, so having conversation and remembering that you're still talking to a human being is, I feel like you can just go back to like that simplicity of a conversation. And then it just starts flowing because they love to be asked, how's your day going? What are you doing? And sometimes it's so simple.
Yes.
And that's really all that it has to be. But it's such a great opportunity, I feel like, for the community to meet and interact with somebody who might have a different ability than them.
And it's so empowering. I mean, I've had so many friends, particularly friends with kids, that are like, man, I want my kids to interact with people who are different from them, but I don't know how to do that.
Right.
Right. And so like our kids are watching us. And I always say, based on my parents and the volunteer experience we did, like what we do as parents today is what our kids will one day display.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's been really fun to watch a lot of my friends get involved with ESP and interact with Java Joy because their little humans are watching them
Mm-hmm.
and they're watching them hug someone in a wheelchair and interact with someone with autism. And the person's flapping their hands or like you said, has a tic, or may it take them longer to answer the question. And these little tiny humans are learning how to interact with people who are different than them through their parents. And then they go and they may get a high five or a hug, and then they're learning how to engage. And so I think there's something really empowering about Java Joy specifically in interacting, because it's not only helping us lean into the awkward and find the aha, but it's also trickling down to our kids becoming more inclusive and more aware of the abilities that everyone has been given, not focused on their disability.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. Well, I feel like there's so many more things we could talk about with ESP, but I know we're running out of time. So I just want to wrap up with a few questions. What are the ways that listeners can get involved with ESP if they feel led?
Yeah. If you aren't in the Georgia area, I would just say follow us. Like follow us on Instagram, follow us on TikTok, look at our website. We are growing. And so those people that are outside of the state can be a part of that growth just by watching, or if they feel led, investing in the growth of what we're doing, hopefully soon outside of the state. If you're in the state, check us out, whether you're in Northwest Georgia, Northeast Georgia, or soon to be South Georgia, or you're in Atlanta. We have an opportunity for you. Your family can come serve at a family dinner that we have. You can come be a part of a popsicle pal during the summer. You can come wrap gifts like Loverly has done. We've got all kinds of big hearts in February. Anyone can come and stay a weekend in Athens, which we would secretly love anyone to come to Athens, but we have a big gala in February. So there's all kinds of ways to be involved, but I would just say start by following. Again, it's just about shifting those perspectives and changing your brain wiring to begin to familiarize yourself with people with disabilities. And then even if you aren't local to an ESP, I bet it will shift how you interact with people in your community.
Yeah.
Whether you're at the grocery store, you see a kid tantruming at the Mexican restaurant, and you think, man, that parent, all of a sudden it shifts your perspective. Like maybe that kid has autism, and it changes how you lean in and interact with people in your community. So I would definitely encourage to follow. We have all kinds of swag you can purchase too. I know Chris loves wearing our Seeability hat. We also have some more exciting Seeability type things coming out. Just brand awareness for ESP, but more specifically good stuff that you can feel proud of wearing that helps employ our Joyristas.
I love my Seeability sweatshirt, the blue. It's one of my favorites.
It's cozy and cute.
I know it really is. Okay, so this is a question for you. What is the most meaningful act of kindness that someone has extended to you that has had a lasting impact on your life?
Act of kindness. Immediately, my brain fires to probably 100 different things that people, I feel like God has blessed me with so many generous people in my life that have helped lead me and guide me. But I think I have to go back to that 18-year-old girl in the Umbros. And my story with Martha, our founder, was that when she was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer that summer, I didn't know that she had been diagnosed yet. And she gave me my paycheck one afternoon on a Friday. And she said, there's a letter with it. Don't read it until you get home. And this was like the third week of my first summer at camp. And of course, I'm not a rule follower. So I hop into my little beat up Honda Accord in my wet swim team bathing suit and Umbros, and I rip it open thinking like, am I getting fired from my first job? And I see the paycheck, which I mean was all of like $6 an hour at that point. But I'm like, yes, I can go to Target and get a new date night outfit. So I'm good. Got my first paycheck. And then there was this letter in there, and it was this letter from Martha, and she had taken the time to handwrite me a letter and said that she saw something in me. And, at that point, I didn't know who I was or who I wanted to be, and was comparing myself to so many different people. And she listed out what she thought my abilities were. And she said that she saw leadership ability in me, and that coming Monday, it was a Friday, I was going to be leading a unit, and she was demoting somebody else who actually had expressed she didn't want to be a leader, and was promoting me to a leader. And, at that time, I didn't have my camp badges. Like everybody else had worked there for 4 or 5 years. And I look back on that time and that beat up Hondo cord and me sitting there in my wet swim team bathing suit and thought, that act of kindness of just taking a few minutes to tell me what she saw in me actually activated the abilities that now have changed the lives of thousands of people.
Yeah.
And that moment of time and that willingness to share what she saw and believing in me allowed me to believe in myself just a few months later when she passed away. And so I think that will always ultimately be the ultimate act of kindness, was her seeing something in me and believe. And still to this day, as our founder, I know she believed in me, 20 years later, which is a gift that I'll always carry.
I love it. Well, tell us where on Instagram we can find ESP, and tell us where we can find you, because I actually really enjoy watching ESP through your eyes and through your stories. And I'm amazed at how you can be at a golf tournament and then a few hours later you're at camp checking in. And I just feel like you show a really good behind the scenes of the fun that's being had at ESP. So do you mind sharing those 2 Instagram handles?
Yeah. So ESP's Instagram is ESP_Inc. Java Joy is just Java Joy. And then you can find me, and like you said, all the behind the scenes funny stuff that happens with ESP and how my typical kids are involved with ESP as well, at Laura Hope Whitaker.
That's perfect. And we will leave all of those Instagram handles and the ESP website in the show notes. So you guys can just easily click there, and it will give you all the ways to follow along with ESP. But Laura, thank you so much for spending time with me today for this conversation. There's been so many amazing nuggets of wisdom that I think our listeners are going to absolutely love and take away from our conversation. So I truly appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It's been awesome.
All right, friends, until next time.